I've never told this story to anyone, and I don't really intend to tell it again. I have a pounding migraine today, and this thread has kept me good company as I've drifted in and out. I don't really like talking about this time in my life, but I want to contribute. When I was 10 to 12, I lived with my mother. We were below poverty level poor. We lived up in the mountains around Santa Cruz, California. My mother had a friend that owned a large bit of property up there, and he let us stay in the trailer up there. Our trailer was very small and was right beside a garden. A chain link fence ran around the garden to keep the dog the owner had out, along with other animals. Deer and things are very common in the area. Also, inside the fenced area was a single room. It was built like a tiny house, but it was only a single room on the inside. This room had electricity, and since our actual trailer didn't, I spent a lot of my time in there. I was super into video games. There was one thing you should know right now. This small fenced-in area was only a small part of the property, but most of it was heavily forested. Also, I refused to leave the fenced area because the owner's dog had been mistreated by children in the past and was very sketchy towards me all the time. If I was alone, it would bite at me, even through the fence. The fence was tall, at least 7 feet high, and wasn't movable though. So as long as the gate was closed, I was safe. Lastly, there was no one else around for miles and miles. Now, I tell you all this because I think it's important for you to understand what kind of scene this was before I really get into the story. We have a fenced-in location that seems fairly safe. It contains a trailer and a single room with power that is not connected to the trailer. Again, nothing else around for miles. My mom's van is parked out in front of the gate to the fenced area, and a single unpaved road runs from this garden for about a mile to the main house. Now then, I brought friends up there to sleep over here and there. We all thought it was pretty cool, you know? Like camping out, sort of. We would get our own room to stay in to play video games all night long. It was like a dream come true. The downside was simple. When it got dark out, it got really dark out. There was no city around, and the trailer would not be lit up. There was no bathroom to use in the room. You would have to walk through the dark garden in order to get to the trailer to use it. Odd things happen out here from time to time. It was always something that could somewhat easily be explained away though. Noises like people working at night sometimes, or once me and my friend were sitting out in the garden and we saw a shadow as big as a small bear bound up a tree, but the tree didn't shake like there was weight on it. The dog also creeped me out, but you know, angry dog, I was a kid, it happens. Now, I'm a scaredy cat, I always have been. To be honest, I don't even know why I even come to X. I have trouble walking through a lit house if I'm all alone. My friends, however, tend to be more outgoing. Just the kinds of people I get along with. This time I had a friend over. His name was Jacob. We were staying up all night playing Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on my Sega Genesis on a ratty old television. We started playing as the sun went down, and by the time we were finishing up the game it was about 2 a.m. That's when we heard it. We turned off the game getting ready to find something else to play. There was a rumbling in the woods behind the room we were in. Like somebody was rolling something really heavy around. We hadn't heard it before because the noise from what we were playing was loud. Immediately, I had goosebumps. Jacob was not really worried about it. It's not like there was someone else's house or yard right over there. It was forest for miles, and it sounded like someone was constructing something or some shit. Dragging or rolling something really big. Eventually, Jacob just convinced me to play some more games. I agreed on the condition that we turn the volume down so we could hear if something happened. We started playing and I didn't even notice the noise stop because I was getting so engrossed. A couple hours later, Jacob said he had to use the bathroom. I was feeling fine by then, so I was fine when he left to relieve himself. He was taking a while, so eventually I decided I was gonna go check on him. Besides, I could use the bathroom or grab a snack while I was at it. I opened the door to leave and he was just standing at the doorway. Right outside the door, facing it, scared the shit out of me. I asked him what he was doing and he just stood there, blocking the exit. I realized he must have snuck up to the door, because I could hear him walk away from the room but I hadn't heard him walk back up to it. It was super quiet out there without the noises of the city. I should have been able to hear him. He refused to say anything or respond, he just stood there. I told him he was creeping me out, but it was not unlike him to try to scare me like this. Finally, I decided to just go to the trailer and use the bathroom myself, partially because I knew my mother was asleep in there. I told him what I was doing and then moved past him. When I pushed him out of my way, his skin felt freezing to the touch. I jumped a little, but it was a cold night and he had been standing out there for like 30 minutes, so I figured that was to be expected. I walked as quickly as I could to the trailer. He followed me, like right on my tail. I joked a little, saying that he already surprised me by scaring me at the door. The joke is already over. Finally, I got to the trailer and walked in. He didn't follow, just stayed at the doorway. I checked on my mom, who was fast asleep, then turned to go to the bathroom. Now, it being a porta potty, we keep the bathroom door shut because it, well, smells bad. When I reach for the door and try to open it though, it's locked. A nervous voice came from behind the door. I'm in here. I quickly turned to look at Jacob, but the door was still open and there was nothing there but pitch black night. I freeze in terror. I would have heard the door open if he had come in behind me and gone that way. There is no way to do it quietly. It creaks like a motherfucker. I yelped so loud that my mom woke up startled. I stared at the doorway, unable to bring myself to move a muscle. She got up, walked over there and looked out. Not seeing anything, she closed the door and asked me what was wrong. By now, Jacob was coming out of the bathroom and acting perfectly normal, but a bit confused. I explained what had happened. Jacob said he was just taking a long time in the bathroom basically. Neither of them believed me at all, no matter how much I insist. My mom is sure that I just got sleepy and imagined it, and Jacob thought I was trying to prank him. So my mom gets out a big flashlight and walks us back to the room. She tells us to go to sleep, then leaves and goes back to bed herself. Now, this room doesn't have any windows or anything, so after a while I calm back down a little. I'm telling myself that my mom was right. I must have had like a waking dream or something. Jacob insists he was in the bathroom the whole time, because there is just no way to get around without being heard. So I settle down. I'm a little rattled, but I'm thinking I can just sleep it off through the night. Suddenly, the dog starts going nuts, right behind us. The room is up against the fence, so the dog must have been like right behind the room on the other side. I felt like I jumped so high I was surprised I didn't hit the roof. Jacob's laughing at me like, "Ha, the dog's barking at a squirrel or some shit and you're shitting yourself." It keeps going like that for a long time though. Suddenly, the barking stops and gets replaced by whimpering. There's about 45 seconds of silence before we hear something new. A small scratching sound on the back wall of the room. We both try to be as silent as we can. Eventually though, it stops. After 5 or so minutes of silence, Jacob decides to be brave. He insists he's gonna get my mother up, tell her something crazy is going on, and we're gonna go from there. With some kind of divine adult protection, no doubt. I wish he wouldn't leave me alone, but there is no way I'm going out there. He arms himself as best he can with a tennis racket we had in the room with us. Then he takes a couple deep breaths and opens the door and dashes out. I close it as quick as I can behind him. In less than 30 seconds, I hear a scream. Not long after that, the door flies open, and he comes back in looking pale as a ghost. He's breathing like he just ran a marathon. His eyes look as big as dinner plates. I ask what's going on like 4 times before he finally starts getting words out. He tells me he walked out there, and as he was walking through the garden as quick as he could, he saw my mom, just standing there. He tried to talk to her, but she looked at him with a blank expression. Getting super creeped out because of what happened to me earlier, he took a couple more steps towards her, telling her that he thought something was in the woods. Suddenly, her face turned to an awkward smile. Then he realized something terrible. He hadn't noticed sooner because of the darkness and how much of a hurry he'd been in. She was on the other side of the fence. Now, the door to this room does not lock, and as I explained earlier, this room had no windows. In retrospect, whatever was harassing us seemed to be adverse to actually entering the room or the trailer, because the Jacob one didn't come in either time he could have. Also, this room was not sturdy. Either way, we stacked everything we could against the door, thinking somehow that like cartoons, this would definitely keep the creature out. For the rest of the night, we heard scratches coming from all around the room. I cried, and Jacob looked like his mind had left his body with fear. At one point, I thought I had heard it speak too. I heard from right next to where I was resting against the wall, in my mother's voice, quietly. The same exact phrasing and intonation she used earlier in the night. "What's wrong?" Followed immediately by, "Go to sleep." The sun must have come up eventually. The scratching eventually stopped. We heard my mom come to get us, this time actually hearing footsteps. We absolutely refused to leave the room. My mom had to go get the property owner and have him take the door off. When we saw that it was actually her, I burst into tears again. We never had an experience like that again, and eventually moved away. But that night still haunts me. I still refuse to go out at night unless I'm with a bunch of people, and I will never live in the woods again.